Today, we're going to be doing a full build and install tutorial on this 3rd Gen 4Runner headlight, and we're going to be building out what I think is the world's first true quad projector headlight for a 3rd Gen 4Runner. Now, before we get into the build itself, I'm going to quickly go over what a projector retrofit is because I know a lot of you guys are probably pretty new to this. So the factory 3rd Gen 4Runner headlights use a pretty standard halogen bulb inside of this giant reflector housing. These don't put out a ton of light, so what a lot of people end up doing is they buy an LED bulb replacement, which causes a ton of glare for other drivers without putting much usable light on the road for yourself to use. There's a lot of reasons as to why this happens, which I'm not going to get into, and if you want, you can do your own research, but ultimately, reflector housings are just not that good. Now that's where projector retrofits come into play, and it's pretty much what every modern car on the road now uses. Projectors are taking what is in this giant reflective bowl and putting it into this compact little device. So how do these work? Well, they have a lens on the front of it designed to magnify and aim the light right where it needs to go, and they also have a cutoff shield on the inside. The cutoff shield inside of this projector is designed to sharply cut off the line and prevent upward spill of light into oncoming driver's eyes. This means you're putting way more light onto the road in front of you, and from an oncoming driver's perspective, your headlights don't have glare and it's not going to hurt their eyes. For today's retrofit, I'll be using this Micro D2S 5.0 from Morimoto because I believe it is currently the best compact sized projector on the market. The bi in bi xenon just means that it has both low and high beam capability, and the xenon means that we'll be using an HID xenon bulb. There are also bi LED projectors on the market which have less parts to replace and no bulbs to replace, but I find myself continually going back to the HID projectors because the LED projectors are just simply not capable of providing the same beam width. If you do a quick internet search, you'll see that that is the biggest complaint from people with LED projectors. Anyways, enough of that. Let's talk a little bit about how this build works. So these 3rd Gen 4Runner headlights are pretty compact in size, and they use a single dual filament halogen bulb. Most modern cars usually have a dedicated low beam and high beam bulb, so doing a quad projector retrofit like this is a lot easier, but unfortunately for us 3rd Gen guys, we don't have that luxury and we have to deal with this really small headlight housing. Over the past few months, I have spent countless hours trying to make the perfect kit that will just barely squeeze 2 of those Micro D2S projectors into this headlight. Now with the traditional retrofit, we were just adding a single projector to each headlight, but with this new kit, we were able to squeeze 2 projectors into it and effectively double our light output. Anyways, let's quickly go over what comes with this quad projector retrofit kit. So each of these retrofit kits comes with a driver and passenger side projector holder. These are made from a high temperature polycarbonate material that is designed to withstand the high temperatures that are going to be generated in this headlight. Now in order to get this to fit into our headlight housing, we are going to have to drill 2 large holes. To drill the holes, we have this drill hole alignment adapter. So these drill hole alignment adapters are designed to work with both depot and TYC headlight housings, and they work by going onto the back of our headlight housing. They will snugly fit into place once we align them, and we'll drill our holes and we'll be able to fit our headlight projector holders into the headlight. For each quad projector retrofit, we are going to need a few more things. So of course, we are going to need 4 of these projectors. We're going to have 4 of these XB55 computers, 4 of these igniters. We're going to need 2 of these wiring harnesses, and a couple of other odds and ends that I'll be mentioning throughout the video, and it'll also be written down in the description below. Anyways, I have a brand new headlight right here, so let's jump into the build. The first thing we're going to do in this build process is disassemble this headlight housing. So this is a brand new headlight housing from Depot, but you can also use a TYC headlight housing. It doesn't really matter which brand you use. Both of them have a nice glass front lens, but for today's purposes, we are using a Depot headlight housing, which you can get on Amazon. To begin disassembling it, we are first going to turn this headlight around and remove this back cover. Taking this cover off is quite easy. There are only 2 10mm nuts on each side to take off. You'll also have to take off this little plastic clip as well as the spring on the other side. To remove the spring, I have a set of pliers, so I'll go ahead and grab it and pull it off. Before we take off this little plastic clip over here, We're first going to loosen these two nuts a little bit, so that way there's some pressure pulling upwards. That'll make this a little bit easier to get off. Now we should be able to get this clip off. Just like that, and it's released. And now we can take these two off the rest of the way. Next up, we're going to remove these two bolts by removing these two screws on each side. And we are also going to remove this plastic clip and this spring, and this will make sure that nothing is melting on us when we put this in the oven. After you've got this removed, make sure you keep it. I'm going to keep it in this magnetic bowl over here so we don't lose any parts along the way. Now we can go ahead and remove this gasket along with the bulb on the inside, and you can go ahead and throw these away because we are no longer going to need it. There's a little light shield on the inside which we're not going to be able to remove until after we've taken the lens off the front, so for the time being, go ahead and leave that there. Now the last step here is to remove the 4 lens retainer clips on each side, so that way we'll be able to remove the lens off of the front once we put it in the oven. So in order to get the lens off, we are going to have to put it in the oven. So I have the oven set at 250 degrees Fahrenheit. We're going to go ahead and put it in there, let it sit for 10 minutes, and then the glue should be nice and soft and we'll be able to take this off easily. We just got the headlight out of the oven. It is going to be very hot, so make sure you're wearing gloves of some sort when handling it. Now, I have this tool from the Retrofit source. This makes removing headlight lenses really easy, but if you don't have one of these pliers, then you can go ahead and just use a flathead screwdriver. So we're going to turn it around. We're going to try to find a little gap and insert this tool into it, and we should be able to pry it off. And you can kind of push it into the slots on each side to try and prevent it from getting anywhere else. So now that we have the lens removed, go ahead and flip it over. You can go ahead and put like a coin under each corner to prevent the glue from touching the counter and sticking to it. So now we can go ahead and grab our drill hole alignment bracket. So you'll notice that it does say driver's side and it says bottom here. So there's also a passenger side, and the passenger side also says bottom. The bottom part is just denoting which side of the headlight it is supposed to go on, and then this is telling you which headlight. Now I do have the headlight backwards, so this is the bottom of the headlight and this is the top. I just put it this way because it's a little easier for you guys to see what I'm doing. But if we flip it over, you'll notice it has this plastic piece protruding outwards. So we're going to take the bottom side and align it with the bottom of the headlight, and that part that's protruding outwards will simply slide into place. Now, before we do any drilling, we do need to make sure that this piece is aligned. So we're going to go ahead and turn it around, and you want this bottom flat edge of the adapter to be aligned with the bottom flat edge of the headlight. So as you can see, it's a little bit off. Now in order to align it, all you have to do is lift this up and kind of eyeball it until this bottom flat edge is aligned with this edge over here. So now that we have this aligned, we're going to make sure that it is seated all the way, and then we need to secure this to the headlight housing to make sure it doesn't move on us while we are drilling. The best way I have found for doing that is to just take some tape. So for now, I'm just using this shipping tape, but we're going to take this tape and fully secure it to the headlight housing. Now this might look like a lot of tape, but I think it's better to be safe than sorry. I really don't want this shifting around because I don't want to have to do it again. If it is a little off, it's not the end of the world though. It'll probably still work. You'll notice that these holes did get covered in the process, so we're going to go ahead and take a blade and then cut these holes out. So this hole locator is designed for a 2 3/4 inch hole saw. So I just got this one from the Home Depot. We also have our power drill here and the adapter to be able to use these hole saws. So we're going to go ahead and place this on here. We're going to take this outside and then we'll drill out the 2 holes. I've gone ahead and placed our headlight on this large cardboard surface, and that is just to contain any of the plastic shavings that's going to come off from this. It's also a good idea to wear a mask when we're drilling into this so you're not breathing in any plastic particulates. And while we're drilling, make sure to take your time and make sure that this drill is centered directly in the middle of this circle. This adapter is made of plastic and the drill can sometimes wander from side to side if there's too much pressure in either direction. Now, if your drill is going to wander in any direction, it's probably best if it wanders towards the middle. We really don't want this drill bit to go towards the outside because on the outer portion of the headlight, it starts to slope a lot more. And if it starts cutting that way, it's going to create a very large gap. If it is off-centered a little bit in either direction, that's really not that big of a deal because we'll be using JB Weld to fill in any gaps at the end of this anyways. Let's start drilling this hole. So we are most of the way through now. As you can see, this bit is level with the adapter, so that tells me that we're going in straight. If you were going in a little crooked, ideally you would want to try to fix that before you go all the way through. So we have cut most of the way through on our first hole, but you'll notice that this drill bit is not going to want to go all the way through. And the reason it's not going all the way through is because the depth that it is cutting is deeper than the length of this hole. So that's why I brought the Dremel along. Also, I found that a pair of dikes works as well, or any other cutting tool. So we're just going to cut the topmost portion of this off and that'll allow us to drill the rest of the way through. Having a Dremel is nice because I actually made really quick work of that. Now before I cut the rest of the way through this, as you can see, I was off-centered a little bit. You can tell because some of the plastic was being chipped away at on this side, but that's not so big of a deal because we'll be able to correct that later on. And just like that, we're through. Now we're gonna do the same thing on the other side. So now that we finished drilling both holes, go ahead, get the vacuum cleaner, dispose of all the little plastic bits on the ground, and then we'll work on cleaning the headlight itself. So for the most part, I've got this all cleaned up. Now, if you do plan on keeping this chrome housing, I do recommend being a little more gentle with it. But since I plan on painting the interior of this black, I haven't been too concerned with preserving the chrome finish. I'm also going to bring this over to the sink to wash off any little remaining particulates on it, and then we're going to test fit our adapter. So as you can see, this plug is on the left side of the headlight at the bottom. So I'm gonna go ahead and drill a very tiny 1/8 inch hole on each side of the projector holes. I probably should have done this step before I painted it, but I forgot, so that's a mistake on my end. But we're gonna go ahead and drill one hole right there and the other hole right down there. Make sure you're not drilling through the projector adapter that we installed, and make sure you are drilling right through the housing. Now that we have our headlight housing cleaned off, we need to go ahead and test fit our projector adapters. These are side specific, so we don't want to mix them up. And right now, I'm going to show you how you can tell each side apart. First off, on these projector holders, you'll notice that one side sits a little farther in front of the other side. Now, since this is the driver's side headlight, we want the side of the projector holder that is a little bit shorter to be on the right side. As you can see, this one would correspond with the driver's side headlight, and this one would correspond with the passenger side headlight. But these can be mixed up. If I go ahead and flip this one over, you'll see that it looks just like the driver's side headlight. But there is one difference that I'm going to show you. If we take a look at the projector, you'll notice at the top of it, there is a little slot running along it. So this is the top of the projector because it has the slot, and this would be the bottom side of the projector. Each of these projectors comes with this special H4 washer, and you'll notice that the washer has a little tab on the inside of it at the top. This little tab is going to be aligned with the groove on this projector so it can only be installed in one direction. If we take a look at the back of the projector, you'll notice that there is one tab at the top and there are two tabs at the bottom. So the tab at the top of it is going to signify the top of the projector. Now, the same thing applies to the back of our projector holders. So if we take a look at the back side, this is the top of it and this is the bottom, and you'll notice at the top there is one slot and there are two slots at the bottom. So if I go ahead and install the washer into the back of it, it sits in it just like that. If we were to somehow grab the wrong one and try and install this one on the driver's side of the headlight, and we had it facing in the same direction like this, you'll notice that there are two slots at the top and there's one slot at the bottom. So that tells us that it's upside down and we have it on the wrong headlight. So this one right here corresponds with the driver's side headlight because we have this shorter side, which is going on the right side of the headlight. And also our washer has that one tab at the very top. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the headlight housing, and we're going to place it inside and make sure that everything fits as it should. Give it a little push, and it should slide up into place perfectly just like that. Now, if for some reason yours doesn't fit at this stage, such as it being a little too tight on one side or the other, you're going to go ahead back to the last step and take the drill and just drill it out a little bit more until it fits perfectly like this. If you are using these depot housings, it should protrude just a tiny bit past this edge, but if you have a TYC housing, it might sit a little recessed because they are a little bit different. Now, before we go any further, we're also going to test fit the projectors to make sure that the edges of the projectors are not coming into contact with the sides of the housing. To do this, go ahead and grab your projector and make sure you've installed the silicone washer on the bottom of it, and we're going to gently place each projector into its spot. So as you can see, everything looks good, so we're going to go ahead and move on to the next step. Before I permanently install these projector holders into this housing, we're actually going to take this out so that way we can sand down the entire inside of this to prepare for painting. Of course, if you're not painting it black or any other color like I am, you can completely skip this step and go ahead. But since I am painting mine black, I'm going to go ahead and do this now so that way I don't have to sand it with this already installed. I'll be sanding the inside of this headlight housing using the sanding block, and this is going to provide a bit better adhesion for the primer and paint later on. As you can see, it's a lot less shiny now. We scratched it up the best we could, so that way when we paint it, we have a lot better adhesion. So we're gonna quickly clean this up and we're gonna begin installing our projector holders. To permanently mount the projector holders inside of our headlight housing, I am going to be using JB Weld as our adhesive. Make sure you get the professional sized ones because we are going to be using a fair amount of this. And I also recommend getting the normal JB Weld instead of the quick setting JB Weld because the normal one has a considerably higher strength. Before we fully go ahead and glue this thing in, you'll notice if we take a look at the back of it, there should be a little bit of wiggle room to tilt the projector holder from side to side, kind of like that. Now, we really don't want this to be crooked in either direction, so before we fully JB weld it in place, we're going to make sure that we have the flat back of the projector holder perfectly parallel with the flat back of the headlight housing. We don't want this projector holder moving during the curing process of the JB Weld, so before we set it in place, we're going to make sure that we have it in a location where there is no chance of it being moved, and we're going to place some kind of thin objects under each of the four corners on the back side of it to make sure that it is perfectly level. As you can see, I have the housing sitting on its backside, and I've gone ahead and placed a dime under each of the corners on both this side and the other side, and if we take a look around the entire thing, there is a very similar gap underneath the bottom of this projector holder on all four sides around the edge of it. Now we're going to get some JB Weld ready. I'm only going to get a little bit of it ready at this time, and we'll be using a 50-50 ratio of the two compounds here. I'm only going to be using a little bit of the JB Weld for the time being, and I'm going to be applying it in a few select places within this headlight housing. Remember, right now I am not fully sealing it in. I am only fixing the projector holder to the headlight housing so it doesn't move for the remaining process where we fully seal it in. A trick that I learned from some people online is while applying this, if you are wearing a glove, you can go ahead and take your finger and kind of smooth out the area that you've applied it to. This will get rid of any blobs and give the overall finish a much cleaner look. It is now the next day and the JB Weld has fully cured. The projector holder is pretty much firmly set in place. Now, even with this small amount of JB Weld we use, it is almost rock solid in there. This stuff is incredibly strong. So we are going to be using JB Weld to line the entire ridge along the outside of this projector holder. Our goal is to make this as watertight as possible, and to do that, we are going to be lining both the inside, and then we're going to come along and do the entire outside to make sure that absolutely no moisture can get in. I'm not the best when it comes to applying JB Weld. If you guys want, you can go ahead and do some Google searches on the best way to apply it, because I'm sure that a lot of you guys are going to be able to do this a lot better than I can. So I just finished applying the JB Weld to the inside. It's not the cleanest application. I was trying to use my finger to help smoothen out that bead, but it still didn't come out the best. I have seen pictures and videos online of other people who have done a great job at applying this stuff. So if you guys have any tips, or if you know a better way of applying it, feel free to share that in the comments. I'm sure it'll help out everyone else who is trying to do this as well. But we're gonna let this cure for a few hours so that it hardens, and then we're gonna flip it over and do the same thing on the other side. I've gone ahead and flipped the headlight housing over. Now on the back side, you'll notice that there are some little gaps in here. I actually got this syringe from Ace Hardware and I filled it with JB Weld, and I'm going to try to use this to fill in the little gaps in the back of the headlight housing. Of course, this isn't necessary. On the last headlight I built, I didn't use a syringe, but I'm going to try this method of application just to get into those really tight areas. This actually works really great. I should have done this on the last headlight. I've got those little cracks in the middle filled in, and for the rest of it, I'm just going to apply the JB Weld as I normally would, because this is a little more difficult to use around the edges and it's not going to work as effectively. As you saw, I was using my finger along with a glove on the JB Weld to try and get this as smooth as possible, and it's looking pretty good here now. So I'm going to leave this be, and I'll come back to this in about a day when it's dry. The projector holders are finished being installed, so next up we're going to prepare this for painting. I have some blue painter's tape, and I'm just going to be covering up the edges where all this glue is to make sure that we're not getting paint in there. To paint these housings, I'm using these Rust-Oleum paints. I believe these are rated up to 500 degrees Fahrenheit, which is more than enough for us. I'm going to start by applying a couple coats of primer, and then I'm going to finish it off with this high performance enamel. I'm not going to show the process of doing this because I believe most people know how to use spray paint, and also because I don't want paint particles floating in the air getting on my camera lens, so I'll come back when this is finished. I've let the paint dry for a day or so, and as you can see, we have this nice glossy finish. While we're installing the projectors, we are going to have to make sure that we get these shrouds to fit, and we're going to have to trim a little bit in some key areas. This isn't uncommon to Projector Retrofits at all. In fact, with almost every retrofit, you're going to have to trim your shrouds a little bit. These shrouds are specifically designed to make it easy for us to trim. So I got these shrouds from Morimoto. These are the mini black Gatling gun shrouds, so they come pre-painted like this already. Now for some reason, they don't include screws, and you do need screws to install these. As you can see, there are 4 pegs on the back that we'll be screwing into our projectors. So I went ahead to the Home Depot and picked up these panhead Phillips screws. These are a number 6 by 1/2 inch screw, and I find that these work great. These only cost me $1.50 at the Home Depot, so they're super cheap. This is an 8-pack here. 8 screws is enough for 1 headlight, and since we're doing 2 headlights, you'll need to get 2 of these packs. So to figure out where we need to trim these, we're going to go ahead and set the projectors into the headlight and then go from there. When you set the projectors into the headlight, of course, make sure it is not upside down. So this part with this little copper coil on the bottom is going to be the bottom side of the projector. Before we trim our shrouds, we want to make sure that the projectors are aligned properly. So this bottom flat part at the bottom of the projector should be aligned with the bottom flat part of our headlight housing. We're going to go ahead and place this on our projector, and you can see down there on our projector, there are the 4 holes that it lines up with. So I just finished cutting up both of these shrouds, and on this right hand shroud, I ended up having to cut a little slot in the side because the metal part from this projector was kind of protruding into this shroud. And I also had to do a little bit of trimming to this left hand shroud as well. As you can see, I kind of cut this little shape into it because when it sits on, that little part there that I cut off was protruding onto this side. Now that I have both shrouds properly trimmed, we're going to go ahead and grab our Phillips screws and screw these shrouds into place on the projectors. So I almost forgot, but before we finish installing the projectors, we need to drill a small 1/8 inch hole to allow these wires to fit through. When power is applied to these wires, the cutoff shield will flip down and allow the high beam to turn on. So as you can see, this plug is on the left side of the headlight at the bottom. So I'm gonna go ahead and drill a very tiny 1/8 inch hole on each side of the projector holes. I probably should have done this step before I painted it, but I forgot, so that's a mistake on my end. But we're gonna go ahead and drill one hole right there and the other hole right down there. Make sure you're not drilling through the projector adapter that we installed, and make sure you are drilling right through the housing. So now we are finally going to mount our projectors, and we're going to route these high beam wires through these little holes that we made in the back side of the housing. When we route the wires through the holes, I find it a little bit easier if we remove this little orange grommet. With the orange grommet removed, we're going to carefully set our projector into place and route these wires through the back. We're not going to permanently mount this projector in place yet, but for the time being, we're going to take our special H4 washer, and remember that this little tab should be at the top of the projector, and you see we have a little slot for a projector at the top, and we're just going to slide this into place. Next up, we're going to take this blue anodized lock washer and thread this onto the back of the projector. Now with your kit, you should have this special tool. You'll see that it has these little tabs that stick out that line up with this blue lock washer. We're not going to tighten it all the way down right now. We're just going to get it tight enough so that the projector doesn't move around. Now that I have both projectors installed, I still need to seal up the holes on the backside where our wires are protruding through. I'm just going to be using this JB Weld because that's what I have on hand, or you can use silicone or any other adhesive that you prefer to use. Now that I've run the wires through the back of the housing and I've sealed up the hole, remember that we need to go ahead and reinstall these rubber grommets. Each of your projectors should have come with these plastic connectors, and these are going to be installed on the end of these wires. Now Morimoto doesn't tell us which side goes into which side of the connector, but I went ahead and tested it and I found that it doesn't matter which of these wires you connect to the positive or negative. Now to install these into this plastic connector, it's pretty easy. We're simply going to put this in and slide it into place. And you should hear a little click once it's fully in. If you remember from earlier, I didn't fully tighten down these projectors yet, so right now I'm going to go ahead and do that. So go ahead and get your special tool for tightening down that blue projector lock ring along with your 10mm bolt, and we're going to go ahead and tighten this down the rest of the way. Now I know we haven't aligned these, but even when these are tightened down pretty much all the way, we'll still be able to rotate them with our hands from the front side. For the time being, I'm just going to do a temporary alignment of these projectors, and right now we are only focusing on the rotational alignment. So there are three types of alignment. There is your side to side, the up and down, and then there's also the rotational alignment. The rotational alignment is the only one that needs to be set before we fully enclose this projector. So I don't think you can see this on camera, but there are little slots in the sides of these shrouds, and I can see the bottom of the projector. Now the bottom of the projector has a nice flat side to it, and we want that flat side to be perfectly parallel with the flat bottom of our headlight. So that is how I'll be aligning it for the time being, but later on I'm also going to mount this up to the vehicle to double check that our alignment is correct. Next up, we're going to be installing our D2H bulbs. Now the D2H bulb is exactly the same as a D2S bulb, but instead of having that connector directly on the back of the bulb, it actually has these wires that extend outwards. Now this is really useful for an application like this where we're going to have a really tight mounting space, because with the normal D2S bulb, with the positioning that we have these two projectors in, there's not going to be enough room to add the connector onto the backside once we have this part in place. So we have our brand new D2H bulb right here, and we're going to go ahead and open this box up. Now, when you open this up, you'll notice that you have your main set of wires that is connected directly to the bulb, but it also comes with this extra set of wires that are connected through this grommet. Now, we don't need this, so we're going to go ahead and fully cut off this grommet and remove these extra wires. Go ahead and remove the protective case off of the bulb, and now we're going to go ahead and install the bulb into the back of our projectors. This blue return line should be at the bottom of the projector, and there's only really one way to install it, and it should sit nicely into place. At the top of the bulb, there is a little notch that kind of sits into the projector, and that'll prevent it from rotating from side to side. Each of your micro D2S projectors should have also come with these modal holders, and this is used to secure the bulb to the back of the projector. These have really fine threads on them, and it is made of plastic, so when you're screwing this on, make sure it's level because you don't want to strip those out. When you're installing the projector holder, it doesn't need to go on as tight as that blue lock ring down there, but you do want it to be a little bit snug. The last step before we go ahead and test fit this headlight on the car is we need to reinstall this back cover. Go ahead and grab your little bowl of parts, and we're going to go ahead and reinstall all of these. Now when we reinstall this back cover, you'll notice that as we start to screw this down, this inside edge may start to swing inwards and interfere with this bulb right here. So to fix that, we're just going to need to trim a little bit off the edge. So I've got my marker, I'm gonna mark where I need to trim a little bit, and then I'll use the Dremel and cut that little bit out. I've gone ahead and marked it up so it's a little bit easier to visualize, but we're gonna be cutting out this little section marked in gray. I just finished cutting this out. I was using the Dremel, and this plastic is quite thin, so it's pretty easy to do. And with that done, we can finally reinstall this. Make sure when you're putting this on to pull all these wires up and through this hole. I'm going to be tightening these two nuts down until the bolt just barely starts to show through. Make sure you're also watching for that little plastic clip, and when you can, push this onto the clip, and you're also going to take your pliers and pull that spring up and onto this ledge over here. Now with this bulb here, as you can see, I cut a little bit too far down, so I should probably trim a little bit upwards. So I'm going to do that real quick, and then I'm going to reinstall it again. So I went ahead and trimmed a little bit more off the backside, and that's what it's looking like now. So now we have a nice little gap there. And before we go ahead and reinstall the lens, I'm first going to mount it up on the car so we can finally adjust that beam. Hey guys, so we're now in the garage. I have the vehicle on site here, and we're gonna be showing you the steps to removing our old headlights and replacing them with our new ones. To start the process of getting our old headlights out, we are first going to remove the grille, the filler panel, as well as the corner light. To remove this front grille, we need to remove the 7 or 8 clips that are holding the grille to the body of the vehicle. Chances are on these 20-year-old vehicles that your clips are going to break when you take them off. So what you can either do is buy new clips from Toyota and replace them, or you can do what I do and just use zip ties to hold it together. Next up, we're going to be removing this filler panel. There's just one bolt on the side and a clip on this side. To remove our corner light, we're going to use our Phillips screwdriver and remove the one screw out the top. And there is also a clip at the bottom holding this in that you can use a flathead screwdriver to pop out. Now mine is already popped out, so I just need to remove this screw. To remove the headlight, we need to remove the 2 bolts on this side of it, and there are also 2 nuts on this side to remove, and then it should easily come right out. I don't remember if I mentioned before, but almost all of the bolts that we are taking off are a 10mm. Okay, now that we have finished removing our headlights, I'm going to quickly go ahead and go over the wiring. So since we're doing a quad projector retrofit, meaning we have 2 projectors in each headlight, we're going to need not 1, but 2 wiring harnesses. Each of these wiring harnesses is going to control 2 projectors. And you'll notice that one side is very short, whereas the other side is much longer, and it's longer so that way it can reach the other side of the car. Now on each side of the wiring harness, you have this ballast, which connects to the part of the wiring harness that says ballast right there. And on the other side of this ballast is going to go ahead and connect to this igniter. This igniter connects directly to the back of our D2H bulbs that we installed in our projector retrofit. And last, we also have this wire labeled as high beam. So this is also going to connect directly to the high beam wire coming out of the backside of our retrofit. Each of these wiring harnesses has only a single H4 connector, and we only need to connect it to the side of the car that our battery is on. This connector isn't powering the lights. The only purpose of this is to serve as a trigger to trigger our new wiring harness, since we are not using the factory one. Now, since we have 2 of these wiring harnesses and there's only one H4 plug on this side of the car, we are going to need a splitter. So I went ahead and I picked up one of these H4 splitters online. Otherwise, I'm just going to provide a link so you know where you can find one of these for yourself. So this end of the H4 splitter will plug into the factory point on your vehicle, and then these 2 ends is where we'll be connecting our wiring harnesses. So this is the factory H4 connection that I was referring to, and we're going to go ahead and connect our splitter to it. So now that we've installed our H4 splitter, I'm going to go ahead and wire both of my wiring harnesses. I'll be back once I've wired both of these harnesses in. So now that we have all the wiring in place, we're going to go ahead and take our headlights, mount it to the vehicle, we're going to plug everything in, and then we're going to make sure that the beam is level up against the wall. While you're doing this, you're going to want your car parked on a level surface, because when we're adjusting our projectors, we want to make sure that they are perfectly straight. Now that we've got the headlight in place, let's go ahead and turn it on for the first test run. So with both projectors on in this headlight, I went ahead to align them, and both of them are now pretty much level. I didn't really have to do that much to them, so I'll cover up one of them. So this is with one bulb on, and then this is the other bulb. They look almost identical, so that's perfect. And now we're gonna go ahead and put the glass cover on and seal it all back up. So this is pretty much the final step now. I went ahead and removed the headlight from the vehicle, and now we're gonna go ahead and install our lens back on it. Now you're probably gonna wanna give it one last wipe on the inside with the microfiber towel and maybe some alcohol, and also on the lens of your projectors to make sure that there's no particles in the headlight before we fully seal it up. And then this will pretty much be the last thing that we have to do. So I'm gonna stick this in the oven in the low 200 range, probably around like 230 degrees Fahrenheit. You might want to take off this back cover just to make sure that you don't accidentally melt it, but I'm gonna try to do this while leaving this on and see if I can get away with that. Okay, so I've got the headlight out. I left it in the oven for about 5 minutes. I was afraid of the plastic on the back melting, and now we're gonna go and install our lens cover. Make sure you squeeze it nice and tight because we wanna get a good seal. Now for the most part it's on, but I realized that by not having the glass cover on before I put it in the oven, the glue on the cover probably wasn't melted. So I'm gonna go ahead and stick this back in the oven for a couple of minutes to make sure it's really nice and melted, and then I'm gonna go ahead and try and squeeze it together again, and then we'll install our little clips. At this point, my microphone had died, but I went ahead and installed both headlights onto the car and brought it outside so I can do the final alignment. Here, I'm adjusting the vertical alignment, and the clip is sped up so you can see the changes actually happening. Remember, there are two 10mm alignment bolts on the back of your headlight. The bottom nut is used to adjust the up and down alignment, and the top nut is used to adjust the side-to-side alignment. Alright, so we are now at the part of the video that you all have been patiently waiting for. In a moment, I'm going to turn on the headlights, and then I'm going to flip the camera around and point it downrange so you can see what the light output looks like. Now, of course, camera settings versus real life is always going to be a little bit different. I have adjusted the camera settings to what I believe is the best possible interpretation of what it looks like in real life versus on camera. The ambient lighting does look a little orange right now because we have a street light directly above us, but you're not going to see any of that once I point the camera downrange. Anyways, let's hop into it, and I'm going to go and turn on the headlights. So these are HID headlights, and they do take a little bit of time to warm up. I would say it takes about 10 to 15 seconds. You'll probably notice that the color of the lights is changing, and they're also getting a little bit brighter, and they're probably already at their brightest output right now. So I'm going to go ahead and take the camera and flip it around so you guys can see what I'm seeing. So this is kind of what it looks like in real life. I do have the exposure settings locked. Now I'm going to leave the exposure settings how they are right now, and then we're going to hop into the car and go for a drive. I do have a 50% window tint on the front of the car, so that'll dim it down, and I'll keep the exposure the same the whole time. Actually, before I hop in the car and show you guys a point of view, I'm going to quickly show you guys just driving down this road and back and flip the high beams on a couple of times so you can see what it looks like from outside of the car. Okay, so I just found a dark spot of the road here, and I'm going to show you guys what it looks like from a point of view perspective. And I'll turn on the high beams. Wow, that light, these lights have so much throw to them. Compared to my old BX built headlights, I was using a lux meter the other day, and they were about 3 times as bright with a 55 watt ballast. Now, I don't actually recommend using the 55 watt ballast. It's kind of a do-at-your-own risk type of a thing. I do recommend using the 35 watt ballast just for the longevity and the increased reliability. But I also did a test with a 35 watt ballast, and the total light output was about twice as bright as my old LED projector headlights, which makes sense because you have twice the number of projectors. So I'll go ahead and turn on the brights again here. That is just a crazy amount of light. Okay, so now I'm behind another guy with your average halogen lights, and as we pass him, you'll see like you pretty much can't see his on the road at all, which is a little bit funny. So we are on East 85 right now, and I wanted to show this to you guys because this is like a standard 3-lane highway, and if we pan the camera side to side, you're really able to see the full width of the beam. I know it has been quite a long video, and I just want to say thank you if you made it this far along. I filmed a lot of this stuff a couple months ago, and I really wasn't anticipating the video getting so long. I spent hundreds of hours on this project, and I went through quite a few headlights until I finally settled on something that worked out. So if you guys appreciate all the effort I put into this, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below, and then you'll be set to see any other projects I have in the future. So thanks again, and I'll see you guys next time.